Well, I've pointed to this once during this series, but I want to remind you again that some of John's letter is a bit repetitive. He'll have these things that he sort of sets it down and picks it back up. It's really kind of set apart from most of the other New Testament writings. The Gospels, they tell a story, but they're linear. You've got a starting point and you've got an end point, and it just goes from there to there. The book of Acts, the same way. It's the story of the early church, but it's linear. The book of Revelation is a story, it's a narrative, and whatever you think about how that plays out, it is a story, whether that's future events or current events that are written in a very cryptic way. There's a starting point and there's an end point. And even all of Paul's letters that he wrote, they're linear. There's a start point and there is an end point. And there is, to an extent, John's letter, there's a place that he begins and a place that he's trying to take his readers, but it's kind of circular. He's got these topics that he'll pick it up and he'll take a look at it and then he'll set it down and he'll go on to the next thing and he'll pick it up and he'll take a look at it. But he kind of has a tendency to come back to these things and pick it up, but maybe shift it over and look at it in a different angle. But today you're going to recognize some material that seems to be recycled that John brings back up. So follow along with me in the book of 1 John, starting in chapter 2, verse 28. And now, little children, abide in him, so that when he appears, we may have confidence and not shrink from him in shame at his coming. If you know that he is righteous, you may be sure that everyone who practices righteousness has been born of him. See what kind of love the Father has given to us, that we should be called children of God. And so we are. The reason why the world does not know us is that it did not know him. Beloved, we are God's children now, and what we will be has not yet appeared. But we know that when he appears, we shall be like him, because we shall see him as he is. And everyone who thus hopes in him purifies himself as he is pure. Everyone who makes a practice of sinning also practices lawlessness. Sin is lawlessness. You know that he appeared in order to take away sins, and in him there is no sin. No one who abides in him keeps on sinning. No one who keeps on sinning has either seen him or known him. Little children, let no one deceive you. Whoever practices righteousness is righteous as he is righteous. Whoever makes a practice of sinning is of the devil, for the devil has been sinning since the beginning. The reason the Son of God appeared was to destroy the works of the devil. No one born of God makes practice of sinning, for God's seed abides in him, and he cannot keep on sinning, because he has been born of God. By this it is evident that we who are children of God and who are children of the devil, whoever does not practice righteousness is not of God, nor is the one who does not love his brother. Well, there's a word that you see pop up several times there, over and over in this passage. That word is children. It shows up a couple of times as an address from John as he's talking to the people he's writing to. And then it shows up 4 times where John is describing people. I'm pointing this out because in the Greek, these are 2 similar words, but they are different. In verse 28 and verse 7, where John addresses his readers, he uses the Greek word teknion. In verse 1, 2, and 10, where John describes the people, he uses teknon. Teknion, teknon. Again, similar but different. Teknon is a general word. If I'm describing Carter and Maya, I will say, that is my child. Teknion is a term of endearment. This is the special nature of the relationship. It's like when a parent refers to their children as their babies, even when they're grown. It's a term of endearment. A baby and babies, they're similar, but they're a little bit different in that context. Well, in this passage, John is using the more general term, teknon, to put people into 2 different categories. And that's where we're going to be spending most of our time today. He describes people as either children of God or children of the devil. And I want to point out that there's not a third option. There's not an in-between option. There's either children of God or children of the devil. I'm going to throw a lot of information at you today. There's a lot of points that I've got to make, but the big idea and everything that will fit into it is that there is fruit to being a child of the devil, and there is fruit to being a child of God. But benefit only comes for the child of God. So what did John say was the fruit produced by a child of the devil? Well, first, he said that they practice lawlessness and sin. Lawlessness and sin. We've spent some time on this in the previous weeks, but the intention of John was not to suggest that a sin committed in error after you've come to faith in Christ will erase who you are in the family of God. It will not make you switch from one family to the other. It will not make you switch from having one father to the other. The important phrase in verse 4 is that they make a practice of sinning, or as he said it in verse 6, anyone who keeps on sinning. I have played tennis before, and I might play tennis again someday, but I am not a tennis player. I do not regularly play tennis. The child of the devil, John says, habitually over and over chooses sin. They continue in it. They abide in it. Second, John says that children of the devil, they have not seen God and they do not know him. We talked about that word know a few weeks ago, so I don't want to deep dive into it, but let me remind you that John is talking about the kind of know that indicates a personal relationship. John's main purpose in writing this letter was to combat some heresies that had arisen in the church because of a group called the Secessionists who left the church and they were now trying to convince others to come with them. They claimed that they knew God, that they knew the real God, and Jesus was not a factor in that. But John was clear that they don't know him. In fact, they haven't even seen him. The word being used for see is not about a visual look. If that were the case, most Christians throughout time and throughout the world would be out of luck because most people have never laid their physical eyes on Jesus. But we already know from a couple of weeks ago that the younger generation in this church that John was writing this letter to, they were part of God's family. John made certain to point out to them that even though you haven't laid physical eyes, even though it's not grounded in an eyewitness experience, you can have confidence that you know the Lord. So John, when he used the word see, he was not talking about physical seeing. He was talking about an understanding. John, what he meant was that the Gnostics, the Secessionists, they did not have a proper understanding of Jesus. Let's say that Bree calls me one day and says, hey, I am at TJ Maxx or Marshall's or Home Goods or Hobby Lobby or Sam's Club, all places where she has bought pillows before, and says, hey, they have some pillows here that I like. And I might say, we already have 75 pillows. Do we need more? And she would say, because they match the decoration that we have out right now. They match the season of the decoration. In case you haven't caught on, this is not a made-up scenario. I receive this phone call several times a year, and we really do probably have close to 75 pillows at our home. But I might respond to that scenario with, oh, I see. Well, I'm not physically looking at the pillows that are currently at our house, and I'm not physically looking at the pillows that she's fixing to buy, but I have an understanding of what she is saying. Well, that's what John meant. The children of the devil, they did not have a clear understanding of Christ. And I'm going to say this, I don't know how anybody who has a clear understanding of Christ can go on without surrendering to him. A clear understanding of Christ will make you want to abandon your lifestyle of sin. It will want to make you abandon those lesser loves and surrender to his good plans for you. But the children of the devil, John says, have never seen him nor know him. Third, the children of the devil don't practice righteousness. Now, we're going to circle back around to this in just a minute, so I'm not going to spend any time with it now, but know that John said, children of the devil do not practice righteousness. And then fourth, children of the devil do not love their brother. This message resonates in all of John's letter. We've talked about loving your brother, loving others already in this sermon series, but it is also a message that resonates all throughout the rest of Scripture. And I'm not going to read every single one of them, but let me look specifically at John's gospel because I think it's best to get to the heart of why 1 John says that a person who doesn't love his brother must be a child of the devil. John 13:34 says, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another." Jesus didn't simply just tell his disciples to love one another. He told them why they should love one another. Because they were loved by him. The natural outflowing of being loved by the Lord is that we would love one another. They would be so full of Christ's love that it would just spill over out to the ones around them. If love for others is not happening, especially for someone who you have enough commonality with to call them a brother, John says there in verse 10, that is evidence that that person is a child of the devil. In week 1 of this series, we learned that John's original intent on writing this letter was to correct some heresies, to assure those who were in the church that they were in right standing with God if they were remaining in the message of Christ from the beginning. Well, now here, 6 weeks later, we still view everything with that in mind. So what did John say was the fruit of the child of God? We've just talked about what he said the fruit of the child of the devil was, but what did he say was the fruit of the child of God? The original recipients of this letter were assumed to be children of God. They were in that church. They were assumed that they were children of God. So what were they doing that John affirmed that this is proof, this is fruit? What is the fruit of being a child of God? Well, first, the child of God does practice righteousness. The word righteousness means that you have met the requirements that are satisfactory to God. There is a standard. John said that the children of God, they live in that standard. They live in that satisfactory requirement. The Bible gives some pretty rigid requirements in the Old Testament. This is the Old Covenant. If men are faithful to the Old Covenant, then God is faithful to them. But look what Paul said in Romans chapter 3. As it is written, none is righteous. No, not one. No one understands. No one seeks for God. All have turned aside. Together they have become worthless. No one does good, not even one. If righteousness means that the standard has been met to satisfy the requirement of God, then this is bad news that the Apostle Paul has just given us. No one meets the standard or fulfills their end of the Old Covenant. So how can John say now that those who are considered God's children, how can he say that they practice righteousness? Have they kept the Old Covenant law completely? Have they never messed up any of these over 700 laws? No, and remember that John wrote just a couple chapters ago that even these believers recognize that they still sin. John never wrote that these people were sinless, perfected people. No, they don't practice righteousness on their own. They practice righteousness because Jesus has made them righteous. If you skip down a few verses there in Romans chapter 3, Paul said this, "But now the righteousness of God has been manifested apart from the law. Although the law and the prophets bear witness to it, the righteousness of God is through faith in Jesus Christ for all who believe." Righteousness is given to those who follow Jesus Christ, not because they satisfied the requirements, but because his death on the cross satisfied the requirements. And he freely gives it to those who believe in him for saving grace. Christ's followers are marked by practicing righteousness. Second, John said that children of God are distinct from the world. Do you know what some people say, that some people, that they stay in that child of the devil category? Do you know why they do that? Because they have seen too many people who claim to be Christians but look just like them, but act just like them. There's no distinction. But look what John said at the end of verse 1. The reason why the world does not know us is that it did not know him. John is saying that the difference in a child of God and the world, the difference in the child of God and the child of the devil, is that they don't understand us. They don't understand why we have the joy that we have. They don't understand why we put others before ourselves. They don't understand why we don't participate in the things that they participate in. They don't understand why we would humble ourselves to the lordship of Jesus Christ. They don't understand why we don't just look out for ourselves over everything. There is a distinction. They don't understand because it only makes sense if you understand the transforming of work of Christ in our lives. And they have not experienced it, so they cannot understand it. There is a distinction between the child of God and the child of the devil. There's a distinction between the child of God and the world. You know, when you go to Home Depot, for instance, it's like this in a lot of stores. When you go into Home Depot, it is clear who works there and who does not, because they all have the bright orange vest on. And it's very easy to pick out who, if you need help, there's a distinction between the workers and the customers. Well, John says that there should be a distinction between children of God and children of the devil. Those who have truly been set free from sin, who are truly inhabited by the Spirit, and who are truly children of God, should be easy to distinguish from the world. Third, John says, children of God abide in Christ. The fruit of remaining or abiding in Jesus exists for the Christ follower. There is no in one moment and out. There's no in and out with Christ followers. There is no I'm connected and living in this grace right now, but tomorrow I am not. That does not exist. A person doesn't have the appearance of connected to Christ only on Sundays, but then the rest of the week, nobody can indicate that they are connected to Christ. It is an everyday, all week, all year long thing. That person will mess up. That person will make mistakes. But the person who abides in Jesus looks like they abide in Jesus more often than they do not. And when we do mess up, when they do mess up, they find themselves right back with Jesus. And they continually take steps closer to Jesus, not further away. That is what it looks like to abide in Christ. And John says that's a real fruit. Are they abiding? Are they remaining? Or are they just running around willy-nilly? Are they in and out in 1 minute, out the next minute? Every one of us produces fruit. Whether we are children of God or children of the devil, each person on the planet is a fruit producer. But it is only the children of God who receive a benefit. So let's see what John said the benefits of being a child of God are. First, the child of God can be confident and unashamed. Look at verse 28 with me again. And now, little children, abide in him, so that when he appears, we may have confidence and not shrink from him in shame at his coming. Excuse me. They understood this to mean that when Christ appears at his second coming, they can know confidently that they are one of his children, and they do not have to worry about what the children of Satan have to worry about. They don't have to feel shame for the way they have acted or the sins that they have committed. Two different scenarios. When I was a senior in high school, we had a snow day, a snowstorm that just popped up while we were at school. And so I was in this class, it was called video production, and it was like 5 seniors and a whole bunch of underclassmen. And so the seniors, we got this idea that we should sneak out and go sledding. So when the teacher got up and left for a moment, the seniors, we all got up, we went to the janitor's closet, we stole some big trash sacks, we didn't have a sled, and we thought, this is slick, it'll go. And we went to the Bing Cafeteria Hill. And I know none of you know anything about Bing, Oklahoma, but the Cafeteria Hill is legendary. It's the sledding hill that puts all other sledding hills to shame. And so we went, and that's what we did during fourth hour, was we went sledding. And the next day, we got called to the principal's office. And we knew why we got called to the principal's office. We knew this group, we're the ones that cut class and stole supplies out of the janitor's closet. I stepped into the principal's office with very little confidence that I was not going to be in trouble, with very little confidence that my parents weren't going to get called. I knew what I had done, and I knew that I was going to be in trouble for it. Same school year, I was working at Hibbett Sports, and I got to work one day, and my manager said, "Hey, I need you to come back to the office. I got some questions for you." Well, there had been an incident with another employee. I had nothing to do with it. I was not involved, and I even had an alibi that said I had nothing to do with it. So I stepped into that. There was no shame. There was complete confidence that I would be okay in that situation. Children of God can have confidence that when Christ comes, their record is clean. Children of the devil, they do not have that confidence. It does not exist for them. Christ is going to come back someday. And I don't know how all of that is going to play out, but I do know that on that day, there are going to be some people who are thrilled about it, and there are going to be some people who are not thrilled about it. Or maybe you don't make it to that day. Maybe none of us make it to that day. Maybe we all die first, and we face Jesus at the gates of heaven. We're either going to love that moment, hearing, "Well done, my good and faithful servant, now enter into your rest," or we're going to really hate that moment, hearing, "Away from me, I never knew you." The children of God can face either of these moments with confidence in their standing and with no shame, because their sins have been taken away. Their sins have been wiped away. They present a clean record, not because of anything they've done, but because of what Jesus has done. The second benefit for the child of God is that they are lavishly loved. I actually prefer the NIV version here that says, "See what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God." It is an extraordinary, over-the-top kind of love. Like an extraordinary, over-the-top, you're a parent, you've never had money before, but all of a sudden you come into some wealth, and you're buying your kids whatever they want. It is over-the-top, lavish type of love that knows no bounds. But it is only his children who receive it in full measure. Now, you may be saying, doesn't God love everyone? And the answer to that is, of course, yes, he does. He died on the cross for everyone. John 3:16 says that he loved the entire world. He so loved the entire world. But it is only those who follow Jesus, who are children of God, that will receive that love in its full measure. There is not a great earthly equivalent, but the best way that I can maybe help you understand this is from a parent's perspective. We have some awesome kids at this church. Just this morning, Nora came to practice early with her dad, and I sat at the table with her while she ate her donut, and we just talked about her unicorn headgear, and we just had a good time. I love hanging out with the kids in this church. I care deeply for your kids. I love your kids, and I care about them so much. They are not Carter and Maya, though. They're not. I love your kids a lot, but only my children have full access to a different measure of my love. They receive a different level. They receive a different measure. They have access to me that other children don't have. They receive blessings and gifts and an inheritance from me that other children do not receive. Children of God will experience the full measure of God's ridiculous love that isn't available to those who are not his children. It does not mean that God doesn't love everyone. It does not mean that God does not offer the sacrifice of his Son to everyone. It just means that the full measure of his love is only experienced by those who have followed Jesus, who are his children. And then the third and final benefit of the child of God is that they have a glorious future. Verse 2 says, "Beloved, we are God's children now, and what we will be has not yet appeared. But we know that when he appears, we will be like him, because we will see him as he is. And everyone who thus hopes in him purifies himself as he is pure." Let's just break this down. What are we now, John says? We're children of God. What are we going to be when he appears? We're not completely sure, but we know that we will be like him. We will be pure like him. I love thinking about heaven. I do. I've got some people I love that I cannot wait to see who are already there. I've got a back that never hurts that I'm looking forward to. I've got all the delicious foods that don't affect me in any negative way whatsoever that I'm going to just devour when I get there. I love thinking about heaven, but the truth is I can't really fathom what it's going to be like, and I can't really fathom what I'm going to be like. But for the first time in my existence, I'm going to be completely pure from any defect. I'm going to be more like Jesus than I have ever been. That's what my future looks like. You know, you can generally see traces of someone's future by looking at their parents and their grandparents. When Bree and I were dating, almost every time that we would show up to my grandparents' house, my pawpaw would either already be asleep in the recliner, or before we left, he would fall asleep in the recliner. And we don't have a recliner at our house, but she has always said, for the longest time, that's my future. You falling asleep in the recliner. We don't have a recliner, but the future is here, because I can sit on a couch for about 5 minutes and I am gone. I am out. We don't know exactly what the future holds, but we know that as children of God, we are going to be like him. We are going to be pure like he is pure. We know that we have a future glory because he is glory. We know that we will be pure because he is pure. And I want to say the big idea again. There is fruit produced by the children of the devil, and there is fruit produced by children of God. But benefit only comes for the child of God. For the child of the devil, the lawless, sinful, unrighteous, time not knowing God on earth, for the child of the devil, that's as good as it gets. It never goes up. There's nothing to look forward to. But for the child of God, there is amazing benefit. If you are here today and you know that you are a child of God, cling to that. When the world is hard, cling to the fact that your Father created it. When seasons change, cling to the fact that your Father is never changing. When everything is uncertain, cling to your Father who knows all and sees all. If you're a child of God, you have nothing to fear and nothing to worry about and everything to look forward to. If, on the other hand, you are here today and you aren't his child, don't accept that outcome for yourself. You have an opportunity to switch sides. You have an opportunity to change the trajectory of your life. When I did youth ministry, some of my favorite moments were when kids recognized like the historical family traits that they wanted to change. You may know what I'm talking about, what I mean by that. It is common when a kid grows up with an alcoholic father, it's pretty common that they grow up to be alcoholics. It's common when a kid grows up in a family with divorced parents that they also get divorced. It's common when a young man grows up with an angry, abusive father that he too becomes angry and abusive. These generational sins tend to repeat themselves if they are not met with gospel transformation. And I want you to know that the gospel can change everything. The gospel can transform anyone. And it was always so awesome to watch a teenager say with resolve, that's not going to be me. This family curse stops with my parents. This stops with them. I'm going down a different path. I'm not going down that path. I'm trailblazing my own way. Listen to me, church. If you are here today and you are not a child of God, I want you to know that with that same resolve, you do not have to accept that future for yourself. You can 100% change the trajectory of your life and for the generations that follow you by following Jesus and becoming a child of God. You can have confidence when you face Christ. You can experience the full measure of His lavish love. And you can have a future that is so glorious that it can't even be fathomed or understood. All you have to do is believe in Jesus, surrender your life to Him, follow Him, and you too will be a child of God. Let's pray.